Well, as countries around the world react to President Trump's sweeping tariffs, other global institutions are also grappling with a range of moves from his administration. Yesterday, Princeton University said US government agencies had frozen several dozen research grants as President Trump escalates his fight with elite American colleges. The Trump administration said earlier this week it would scrutinise billions of dollars of federal funding at Harvard University, and the administration in March froze $400 million in funding at Columbia. The focus on grants comes at a time when higher education institutions around the world are struggling to make their funding model work. In the UK, universities are cutting jobs as high fee-paying international students decline in numbers, with the tightening of immigration rules on dependents and another sign of how higher education...
Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Funding and policy making are increasingly linked. Joining us now to discuss all of this is Larry Kramer, President and Vice-chancellor at the London School of Economics and Political Science, former Dean of Stanford Law School as well. Larry Kramer, good morning. Welcome to Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning. It's nice to be here.
I want to talk about the kind of big picture effects of some of the challenges we're talking about. This is a moment when there's such a big focus on UK-US relations. How do you deal with this at an institution like the LSE when that relationship is souring?
Well, we have, as you can imagine, enormous number of connections with U.S. universities. Many of our faculty get their training there. Many of our PhD students get jobs there. There's exchanges and a whole variety. So, what's going on in the United States now will obviously have effects on UK universities. Not so much financial effects, although it will have some of those too. For instance, joint projects that involve grants that come from the U.S. where our U.S. partner is getting choked off from funding and so on. But the larger issue is really the U.S. has long had the largest dominant university system in the world, and the effective dismantling of that and the effective effort to really crush some of the best universities in the world will have just collateral effects of all sorts that are hard to specify, but will be unfolding over the next couple of years.
Around kind of free speech and how they might affect the London School of Economics. And this has been a particular focus of the Trump administration, again, around that freezing of funding for US universities. In terms of DE and I and companies, some continue down that track. Others have pivoted to the US stance. What do you think the LSE view is on free speech?
Well, the LSE view on free speech has been quite clear. Free speech underpins what we do at the university. It is the heart of what makes universities able to do what they do. So our commitment to that has been clear and explicitly expressed. If speech is lawful, then we don't condemn it. We don't try and forbid it. To the extent that people have disagreements, we expect them they can protest. They can come ask hard questions. They can invite counter speakers, but we deal with it that way.
The US, though, is taking a particularly close interest in individual cases that are going on in the UK, and they have a view on it. So there is pressure coming from the United States for the UK to follow a particular path in this area.
Not at the university level, and I don't think if there were, we would do anything about it. I don't think they can put that kind of pressure on us. I don't think they should, and if they tried, we would simply resist it. The U.S. has no business dictating policy for UK universities, none whatsoever.
You do attract a significant number of students, as you mentioned, from the United States as well. I wonder how you see those numbers evolving as time goes on. First of all, you have the currency effects. You've got a much weaker dollar now, which means, in numbers terms, it gets more expensive for American students to come here. But given the political backdrop to this, are you expecting those numbers to fall?
No, if anything, the opposite. And it would be short term, one hopes, to be honest. This is not the way I would like to increase the flow of students to us. But the U.S. becomes an increasingly unattractive place for anybody to go to be either a student or a faculty member. And as that happens, faculty who might have thought of leaving the UK to go to U.S. universities will be less likely to do so. Faculty in the U.S. are much more likely to be coming here. And we're already receiving tons of calls. And you've seen U.S. professors leaving. Students in other parts of the world who might have been thinking about going to U.S. universities are more likely to come to UK universities, and so on and so on.
Is all of that going to pressure the research funding that is available in the UK? Let's say if there's an influx of US academics, is that going to put a lot of pressure then in terms of the funding?
Well, we have to be responsible in how we deal with that influx. So it's not like we can go on a shopping spree beyond our means or resources, but to the extent, it's really what we're talking about is opportunities that might not have been available that we will try and capture within our existing resources.
What sort of growth in terms of student numbers would you expect then coming from the US?
I have no idea now. I don't think anybody can tell you exactly what that's going to look like. Again, we're not talking about, we don't have plans to increase the size of our student body. We don't have plans to increase the size of our faculties. Although if the UK government were smart, they would see this as an opportunity to take advantage of it, much in the way the US did in World War II when there was a flow of amazing scholars out of Germany. Right?
What steps are needed to encourage that?
It's back to the same funding questions that we've been dealing with much more broadly. So the question is how the UK universities are funded will determine what kind of resources that they have available to do whatever it is that the UK government wants to help support them doing.
Sorry, did you just compare the current situation in the US to what was happening in Germany in the 1930s? Just to be clear, I want to be clear.
I know, but it's that kind of move where, no. What I'm saying is in the 1930s, as the German government clamped down on all sorts of things, there was an outflow of scholars to the U.S. It was absolutely something that played an important role in helping build the U.S. educational sector. So if there is, or to the extent there is, an outflow of scholars from the U.S. to other places, it's an opportunity to do something similar. That doesn't turn on a comparison to what the Trump administration is doing to what the Nazi administration was doing in Germany. There's just...
But you said clampdown. You mentioned that there was a clampdown at that time in the 30s, and so there is a clampdown on academics.
I don't want to play a little game and so I can get called out like, oh my God, he's saying the Trump administration is like Hitler. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is there is similar outflow of scholars in the two countries. When it happened, it was one of the things that helped the U.S. university system become what it is. And if it happens in the U.S. for whatever reason, it is something that one can take advantage of.
Coming back to the funding challenges, is this a case of you just need caps on fees to be increased so that you can charge more for students, or do you need more direct funding from the government?
I think there are a variety of potential solutions that could be explored to strengthen UK universities. Raising fee caps is only one. Changing the cost recovery rate on grants is another. Reducing the bureaucratic demands that the government places, which impose costs on universities, is yet a third. Facilitating more philanthropy by making the tax system easier for people to understand what the benefits are is a fourth. There's a whole array of things that are available in order to increase the resources for universities. And I don't necessarily have a strong view on which one we should adopt, but it makes sense to explore ways in which to enhance the ability.
The fees in the UK are significantly lower than, for example, in the United States. I'm sure you'd argue students get the same quality of education in both, but what is a fair level to charge students for undergraduate courses?
I mean, I don't know that I have a number off the top of my head. I would say let's look at the numbers and look at what the actual costs are and at least make that available. I mean, what you can say is basically the fees haven't been raised except for a tiny little amount for more than a decade. Now, what other industry is held under those kinds of constraints? If you were a member of parliament and we said, you're going to get the same salary for the next 10 years, but you have to live within your means, nobody would expect that, right? So, you want to at least enable the universities to be able to provide the education and cover their costs to do so. But again, it doesn't have to be through raising fees. There are a variety of other ways in which to do that. Even in the U.S., the fees do not cover close to the full costs of the education that people provide. Tuition typically covers about a third of the costs. So it's not that the tuition has to cover 100%. It's that across the various devices that are available for universities to have the resources they need, something needs to be done to make more of them.
One of the major elements, though, for UK universities, who are in the midst of a kind of slow burn but becoming acute funding crisis, is overseas student fees, which are far higher than for domestic students. I mean, what replaces that missing money as we see those numbers of foreign students coming down? What does the LSE do, which has a large contingent of foreign students, and especially for the kind of prestige master's degrees that you offer? I mean, that's really acute for you, surely?
So first, the LSE's commitment to having a student body that consists of students from all over the world long predates this, right? It has been built into the school's model since the 19-teens, very early in the year. As a result, we haven't actually seen the same kind of downturn that many universities are because our reputation outside the UK is so long and so well established. The universities that have experienced a drop-off, it was very much a product of government policies that are now beginning to change, along with messaging, which has definitely changed. So the current government has made very clear that they do want to invite international students in because they see it as an opportunity for growth and it's effectively an export industry for the UK that brings benefits to the country. What's happening in the US may actually help turn that around because a lot of students in other countries, when they have a choice of where to study outside their home country, have been going to the US. As that becomes less attractive, that, as I say, I think that's quite likely to be something that will help all UK universities attract more students.
What sort of capacity do you have to be able to accept and upturn applications?
Well, it's not really a question of capacity. I mean, it's a question of what kind of student body do you want and how large do you want it to be. As I say, we don't have current plans to increase the size of our student body because as you grow larger and larger, the culture changes in terms of the experience that students and faculty have.
I want to do the classic news question, which is to try to pin you down on the issue of funding. I mean, ultimately, should students be paying more or should the funding sources be from somewhere else? And basically, because this is the ultimate question for the government. And, for example, we've had recently the blueprint for change from Universities UK. I mean, there's a whole lot of thinking that is going on now about how to get more money into universities because they desperately need it. Are you saying that it should not be from students, that it should be from elsewhere?
Yeah, it's not, by the way, that I don't want to let you pin me down. It's that I don't actually think there's a simple or clear answer to that. I think the goal is to make sure that universities have the resources they need. Each of the devices has costs and benefits and things to take into account.
You've got to have fees going up. I mean, the fees have just gone up this academic year by £285, and that's the first time in 7 years. It's got to go up or be linked to the cost of inflation, surely.
Or some of the other devices that are, again, if I think about the U.S. model, tuition is very high, of course, but they're providing all sorts of things that are not part of normal education. It's certainly normal education in the U.K. So, as I said, the tuition only covers about a third of the costs in most, and there are these other sources. So in the U.K., all of them have been less than they should be. So all of them are opportunities to explore. And the question is, what is the best way? What's the best mix of ways or single way in order to provide the resources that are necessary?
We're hearing you talk about the opportunity that the changes in the United States present for UK universities. I'm wondering what areas of study might particularly benefit. Where are you hearing the interest from most in terms of scholars that are interested in coming and working for you?
Yeah, what's interesting is there's a mismatch between where the U.S. is imposing the funding cuts and what it purports to claim its concerns are. So the funding cuts are being heavily targeted at fields like public health, at the medical sciences, medical sciences and hard sciences, because that's where the largest grants are. So there's a lot of people in those areas who, looking at the funding drying up, are beginning to explore other places. On the other side, in the humanities and the social sciences and the arts, that's where the hostility is being targeted, and so there's a lot of people there too. So I think there really will be potential interest across the whole board, but then it's individual faculty, and there's a whole lot of considerations that are going. It's still a big deal to leave your country. It's still a big deal to leave your university, and so on. So, as I say, I think I'm hearing it across many fields. We did early on begin to hear it in, say, public health, because they were hit very hard, very early. Most of the scholarship and even salaries in that field is soft funding, meaning it's grant funding, not hard funding that's wired into the university. And so in those fields, people who've never had to worry about, for instance, their salary suddenly do. And so they're beginning to explore. Same thing with international development, obviously, where there were massive cuts very quickly. But as the cuts broaden and deepen, I think you'll just see it across the university.